Welcome back to the Bigwater podcast. Here we are, if you can hear us, because there's a little bit outside noise going on. We're at the Cleveland Boat Show. We got a couple Lake Erie studs here with us. We got Ryan Buddie. We've got Tyler Berthold. These guys are walleye catchers, but they also like to talk about it. So a lot of you guys that are catching big fish wherever you may live, you don't like talking about it. These guys aren't going to hold back. So we're going to just kind of have an all-around discussion about walleye fishing. We're going to get to know these guys a little bit better. Both these guys have had a lot of success, fishing. Ryan's traveled around quite a bit fishing on tournament trails, several different ones through the years. So hold on, here we go. The Bigwater podcast starts now. Ryan, how do you get into fishing like you are? Like you are people that before I got to know you a little bit, they're always like, you're kind of a free-spirited dude, right? And I remember hearing things about going to Alaska. Like you got to be pretty into fishing to do that, right? I mean, you don't.
Yeah, it was, as a kid, I grew up on the Rocky River, so I could always just go down and fish. My parents kind of gave me the freedom, which was cool. I don't know I hope parents are still doing that these days. But
probably not.
Yeah, I don't know. But I had the freedom to just go and fish and be outdoors, and I'm really thankful for my parents for that. My grandpa took me fishing, and pretty much any time I got the chance to fish, I would go fishing. I remember in school, I'd leave school and I'd go check the river, to check the flow of the river, to see if I could go fishing. And so I even got made fun of it. People were like, hey buddy, you going to check the river? I'm like, yeah, I don't care, I'm going to check the river.
So how does that translate to you going and working in Alaska? Because there's a lot of people that like, hey, I like to play basketball, but you don't end up in the NBA, right? So good question. So I worked construction for my dad in high school and first year at college. I had a really good fishing buddy that went off to University of Montana, high school fishing buddy, and he had heard of a friend who had worked up there as a guide in Alaska, and we were talking. I hate construction. I don't like shoveling gravel. I'm like, who does?
Yeah. No, I want to go do something like summer in college, 3 months off, like opportunity to go do something that's maybe not your career or whatever. Just go do something that you wanted. And I wanted it to be fishing. I applied to sword boats out of Maine. I applied to commercial fishing boats like in Alaska. And then I also, through him, had heard of, hey, you could be a fishing guide in Bristol Bay, Alaska, which is this huge, just epic area. I was able to I put together the credentials to get the LUPV license, and next thing I know, I'm heading off. And I remember I called my parents up and I'm like, hey mom and dad, I'm going to Alaska to be a fishing guide. They're like, whoa, no. They wanted me to come home and work for them because I made good money working construction, and I had to pay my tuition, or part of my tuition at least, for college. But it was actually a pretty decent paying job for a college kid, and I'm like, no, see ya, I'm going. And it wasn't that, but I talked with them and made it work, and it was an incredible experience. So very thankful for that.
So Tyler, give me the quick kind of cliff. I mean, you grew up in Ohio, right?
I grew up in Ohio. My story is a little different than you guys. I think you both grew up in fishing families, right? I don't know if you did necessarily.
Not really. My dad was big into hunting, so it was an outdoor family, but he fished kind of like I hunt, basically. I like hunting, but I do it very little.
My parents are into fishing too, but they're not
you had boats growing up.
Yeah. And I had great opportunities, but I also see my kids are right now they're kind of into it, but I have friends who call me all the time. They're like, my kid's crazy about fishing, and I'm
hearing that more than
they're not fishermen at all. I just had that the other day at a 40th birthday party. One of my college friends, she's like,
so did I. Literally, my brother-in-law's 40th birthday
party. She has nothing to do with fishing, and she's like, Jack, all he wants to do is ever fishing, and she calls me now.
Yeah, I know, because they're like, I don't know what to do.
I think some people just you were probably that guy, in your family, and I think that some kids just get it.
I'm not a warm fuzzy guy. In case you haven't figured that out. But it's like you helping out with the kids fishing programs. I don't think it takes a lot for some people to get into it. I always say like with ice fishing, because a lot of my clients, they haven't ever ice fished before, and they're like, I don't know, because open water clients, right? And I tell them, let's try it one time. I don't think I've ever had anybody that was dressed properly that didn't like it. And I think it's the same thing with regular fishing, that you just need to give them an opportunity. And that's not even necessarily catching, that's just fishing or the experience or being out there. You know what I mean? So
I could talk about it a little bit. So I grew up with a little bit the opposite experience. My parents had nothing to do with fishing. My dad hunted a little bit. He'd go have some luck. And then I grew up a lot with my grandma and grandpa. My parents dropped me off, they'd go to work, and we started pond fishing, and that was like the extent of my fishing. So I grew up a ton pond fishing, but I thought, when I was fishing in an area, an acre or two pond, and I caught a bass, I thought I was a stud. So I did that for a couple years, absolutely loved it. And then like September 1st, 2001, my grandpa passed away. And that was our big thing we all did together. So I honestly quit fishing for probably 5-6 years. And then I was probably 16, 17 years old, and I met a one friend that was like, hey, I like to fish. And I started going, and we'd go fish local ponds, local reservoirs, all that kind of stuff. And I couldn't believe the first time he showed me like a bait caster. I was like, why would you ever use something like this?
This is more work.
You'd flick it out there and you'd bird nest the whole thing, and you're like,
there's a lot of problems here.
This is dumb. I'm like, why don't we just throw a bobber and a worm out there? Like, this is way easier. That's way better. And my friends would tell me about.
You were a bobber and a worm farm pond guy?
Yeah, something.
Okay. Okay. I'm judging.
Yeah.
I'm judging.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you learn.
Cane pole fishing at Clegg Park Creek for creek chubs.
So we were doing that, and then my buddies would say, hey, I'm going walleye fishing, going perch fishing. Can I go? No, I'm going with my dad, I'm going with my uncle, I'm going with my grandpa. And finally, I think I was probably 18 years old, I finally had somebody who said, hey, if you ever want to go, and I'm like, yeah. And my first ever trip, I can remember my first ever walleye, we were right outside of Lorraine Lighthouse, and I caught my first ever walleye, casting a Erie Deary, a gold Erie Deary. First ever walleye I caught was like a 26-inch walleye, and they were like, we never catch walleye. And then I think I ended up catching one more. I caught a yellow perch, and then I got sick for that day. But it was,
seasick?
Like seasick, yeah. And I still get seasick to the day. Weird,
really?
Weird.
Producer dude is very seasick. Yeah. He doesn't have a microphone to talk right now, but those bands?
So that's what I do. I wear a band nowadays that actually vibrates. It's called a relief band.
Yes. So does producer dude.
So does producer dude.
He's useless without it.
Yep. He's got his on right there.
Not that he's that beneficial with it.
Yeah.
But he's okay.
So I started doing that. We got into a little bit of trolling, learned that, and then I got a little crazy with it. And I probably fished with 30, 40 people, different people, and learned a lot of stuff. Heard about guys like Buddie, like you, like just legends in my mind when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, where I'm like, oh my gosh, these people are in rat boats and a Ranger boat and everything else. And then I finally got into a little bit of tournament fishing, and just been bit up with it ever since. I absolutely love it.
So what really helps make you guys, in the time that you've done it, whether it's limited or not, successful with the fishing game?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind is just willingness to constantly adapt. When I first got into this, we went out and we would go troll spinners all the time. That's what we did. We troll spinners from April through November. That's all we did is troll spinners, and we had a hell of a lot of success doing that. But then it's like, well, guys are you start traveling other places. Well, I can't go troll spinners on the Missouri River, or I can't go, I'm going to Detroit River. I got to learn to hand line. Just constantly willing to learn new ways, and you go to Lake Erie fishing in specific. It's like, when was the last time you heard of a big tournament won on spinners on Lake Erie?
Been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while, but they still work great. But it's, if you didn't adapt.
John Gilman did it, by the way.
Oh yeah. Not recently though.
Well, I don't know how. We don't have that many when you only have a couple a year here, right?
Well, even just
Lewts,
even just Lewts or
Lewts are big
whatever.
nowadays,
Even club tournaments, you just don't hear of it very much, and it just kind of like shows you how much things have progressed. Like, you guys got really good at like precision depth control crankbaits, and then they developed new crankbaits that are really good. And now you have the live sonar and casting techniques. And like look at the NWT last year. It was one cast and swim baits with active target. So it just constantly. Things are constantly adapting, and if you just get stuck on one way of fishing that you had success and kept doing that time after time, and they're going to try to force that to work, so you're going to get stuck behind. And I feel like I'm constantly willing to.
So Ross, I want to stop the podcast for a second.
Whoa!
I know.
Okay.
We'll get back to the guest in a minute. I saw you. I was looking at stuff. I was researching. Get it? I was researching.
Oh my God, you're doing your job? Oh my God.
I'm doing my job. And I was on something called Powder Puff, which I don't know why you were on Powder Puff, but I saw your face on something called Powder Puff or something like that.
Powder Hook, man. Powderhook.com.
Okay, well, what is that?
Well, as you kind of found out, we're cheating on a little bit. Normally, the fellow listeners there at Bigwater know that you have to tease me with ice cream to give a fishing report because I quite frankly hate them. But we are doing an extensive fishing report, amongst other things, with powderhook.com. And they've got a bunch of things across Instagram and Facebook and all that good stuff too. But we're doing a detailed fishing report. They're talking about really detailed stuff with what's going on specifically on Lake Erie here in the western and central basins, and even a few times there in the eastern basin in the summer, now through May of 2023. So we're going to be doing lots of stuff, and you already seen some of it because you caught me red-handed, but we've got a perch, information on there. We're talking about planer boards. We've got all kinds of different information, but with myself and then some other Lake Erie studs that basically are teaching how to catch more walleyes, what's going on currently. And I mean, powderhook.com. It's a one-stop shop right now for Lake Erie info, whether it's a fishing report, videos, or some written articles, how to select a charter captain like myself, different things to think about and talk about. So a lot of unique things there, as you already know.
So powderhook.com. That's where we go.
So we're saying, again, I'm not saying I'm the one that decides if this works or doesn't work, but the Alabama rig style deal with blades, I tried everything: big blades, small blades, shad bodies, dummies, spinners, crankbaits. I couldn't get it not only to consistently work, but actually my buddy, me and John Gilman, we found that at times it shut an entire side down. So have you guys had any experience, positive or negative, with that?
Like a whole side getting shut down, or
well, back then we wouldn't run as many rods, so we were running 4 or 6, but it was we had 3 on one side, we had 1 on there, we would mix it, the inside or the outside or whatever, and we wouldn't catch nearly as many. We would pull that like the opposite of a salmon type rig, you know what I mean, where you put something out that doesn't catch them, but yet it brings fish in. And it was just it was enough, and I'm like, screw this, I'm done with it. And I had heard, guys, and of course the guys I heard that were having success were the guys who were selling some of the stuff, but did you guys ever get on any kind of bite? Did I miss something there? Consistent anyhow.
I played around and had limited success, and I need to do more of fishing like a bait head, spinning with a bait, like a smelt or a shad on it, a dead bait. And at first, there's points where I thought that it was going to be the deal,
It certainly was for the bass industry.
Yeah. The hard part is getting good bait, though, too, for that. How do you catch a bunch of fresh smelt, to use? So I don't know, maybe, or we thought about alewives up in Green Bay, doing it with that and stuff. And I have done it up there, just not that. It's just hard to. It's hard to. I couldn't get it to where it's the deal. What could be next? I don't know. But
even so, forgive me, I watched the Bass podcast. I know, Ditch Pickles, and I was listening to the guy, and he said that on the Bassmaster Elite series, that the forward-facing sonar stuff isn't as successful as it was because he believes that the fish have been conditioned to it on how they're reacting. And then you look at you look at the Alabama rig. Again, with walleyes, I think, not that there's somebody that hasn't just discovered something, but you find an Alabama rig in a walleye store. I don't think you can, because they didn't sell, they weren't catching. When things catch, they tend to stick around.
Sure.
But I saw your face on that, and I get it. But like, let me go and you tell me where to shut up here. But so when you look at like the Alabama rig, yes, it's been banned from certain organizations, but others it has not. But you don't hear the success. Yes, there are certain applications where it catches them, but there was a period, and I could probably even say maybe a couple years, where people would be like, "Oh, we can't catch them on anything. Let's throw an Alabama rig."
Absolutely.
Whoop, done. Game over. And those fish have, again, are they getting smart? I'm not here to say they are or they aren't. But again, enough guys on the Elite Series that I personally know and tell me that, hey, these fish are shying or are reacting differently on the forward-facing sonar, and you go, I don't know.
So I love watching the elites. That's like one of my favorite things to do. I'll watch the elites. I'll watch Major League Fishing.
The ditch pickle guys?
Watch all of it. I just ate up with fish and just love it. And it obviously just depends on where they're at. If they're in Lake Norman, they're fishing a herring lake. They're fishing 50, 60 foot down with just a little single head or a little tiny swim bait. I think it's super effective. If they're flipping mats, not effective. So I think it also depends where they go each year. Obviously, your guys would know a lot better than I do. You were saying like on Erie or for our walleyes that have application, I love going out there and ice jigging. I'll ice jig off my boat. I do it all the time. I had he was out one day and he goes, "Hey, there's a great school of fish out here." I don't know if they weren't eating when Ryan was there. I showed up there and I caught like 30 fish in 2-3 hours. It was a blast.
I caught like 4. Just
he hooked me up on it. He hooked me up on it.
Yeah, I put them on it,
but do I think it's a game changer necessarily on Erie? I don't know. I think the trolling bite's going to be tough to handle outside of maybe some, once in a while there might be a situation like the National Walleye Tour where maybe all the ingredients just came together at the right time for
You're talking about the live sonar.
The live sonar, yes.
I think to me, and I'm not even going to tell you guys right now, I'll tell you off camera, but we're working on something with the live sonar that's not really per se helping you catch more fish, but yeah, it's helping you catch more fish. And I think the same would be with an Aqua View. Like, I don't sit there and use my Aqua View to like see weed beds like a guy that ice fishes or fishes on a small Minnesota lake. Yeah. But I use an Aqua View to help me catch a lot of fish, even though I don't have a rod and reel in my hand when I'm using it, checking different things, whether it's structure, conditions, bait, dropping it down. Like I said this in my seminar the other day, and I had a guy, his jaw I think broke and went to the ground, or he was like, "Oh, I see you got that Aqua View logo. Like, you ever use that?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Hey," because the guy had made a comment earlier, and he said it was something, you might have even been there when this happened. And I said, "Yeah, remember that school of fish you told me you didn't catch any, but they were like 10 feet thick on your graph?" I said, "I would have put the Aqua View down." And he was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And I'm like, "I guarantee those were gizzard shad." I'm like, if those fish aren't moving around and they're solid and it almost looks like it's simulator mode. Now in the past, I kind of found that out the hard way. Now with technology, I don't have to wonder or guess or tell people, hey, that's probably what that is. I just get up my front deck, I drop the thing down, I look at it, and I go, because they don't get out of the way. Like walleye, they're gone. Them gizzard shad don't even budge. And they're not going to hit. They're obviously not what we're after. So I think what we're sometimes learning is, and that's why I wonder about the Alabama rig, and I'm not too shy to say, hey, did I miss something with that? Where do we need to just adapt something a little differently? So it's not that an Aqua View won't help us catch more walleyes or a fish hawk or any of these things. It's when you use it.
Right. Yeah. All the tools are just knowing when to use it, and it's not the puzzle, it's a piece to the puzzle, So something like the live sonar and your Aqua View, and fish hawk too, I use all those things, and it's all just a piece to the puzzle. I'm learning, and so if you can't learn from them,
the elephant in the room with you guys is you always, I think all of us are kind of like this. If you're at a certain point where you want to catch more and bigger fish, right? And I would almost say is the more you fish, the latter is true more than more fish. You just want to catch big.
Yeah, for sure.
I like catching,
especially tournament fishing.
One of the guys that's worked for me for a long time, like he always says, if I don't need to feel the fight of the fish. I don't need to, catch 1,000 of them. He goes, I want that one that we don't have to question, the one that, the camera's already getting pulled out.
Yeah.
And it's not because like this guy doesn't even have Instagram or Facebook or any of that stuff, but he's just, he likes trying. It's like deer hunting, right? Like you want to try to get that thing way before, again, you're trying to be insta famous for this. And with you guys, everything is relative. So you go, I was just in Wisconsin for a sponsor event, and a bunch of these guys were right on Winnebago, Mercury Marine's right there. And you go, okay, catching a 4-pounder there or a 5-pounder, a couple of them you're probably going to win a tournament. Here, you're probably going to go home, right? So everything is relative in life, right? Like everything is relative. So for you guys, catching those fish, now it's maybe a 7-pounder. A handful of years ago, it was probably 9, maybe 10 for whatever that size is, because again, there are certain periods of the year, but I mean, we're talking across the board, because I get guys all the time, they're like, oh, it's only got this much. Well, like, look at some of the Lake Erie Walleye Trail events. Some of the weights will really surprise you up or down.
Yep.
And some of the best guys in the lake that are out there, and they're only going for 5. You guys aren't trying to catch 500, and you see 20-some pounds, and you're like, oh, like, yeah, dude, you're 20-something, just so you know, it was probably 18, bub. I'm like, put them on a scale.
Yeah.
So what are you guys doing with all those things we kind of just talked about to catch, whether it's 5 or 1, if it's on your own and it's that 1, or if it's 5. And I already know what some of these things are, so we're going to test you, because I think I know what you're going to say, knowing you guys. But what are those things that we're doing now to catch those better fish?
So big thing for me, I know it's the same thing, it's a dirty word. I remember I said this last year, networking. I know that's something that maybe in my age we've gotten a lot better at.
You mean jumping me and Ryan's line? That's what you mean.
It could be.
That's why I'm friends with him. I don't have to fish Facebook for reports. I just call Tyler.
But something like that has developed over the years. If I see you catching fish, I know typically you're probably out west. If I know where some people are at throughout the year. Hey, if I know, that kind of stuff throughout the year, like Ryan said, I mean, that is something that is a major tool. If you're not able to fish for a couple days, like I work a full-time job, if I get home at 6 o'clock and I scroll through Facebook and I see, hey, a couple guys have been doing really good in Lorain, it kind of cuts down my search. So
they call me the ghost, right?
Yeah, you're good at hiding.
Even with a wrap bow. Now I know who we got to stay away from.
You don't know what I look like though, so I'm in trouble. See, but so look, like the networking has helped a lot for me. And then just talking to Ryan, talking to everybody else. You kind of know the locations of where you think the big fish are going to be. I know in May I probably want to be in Lorain. I know in April, March I want to be around the Reef Complex. So all those kind of little things throughout the years have obviously helped me out a lot.
The first thing, I mean, that's definitely a good one. The first thing that came to my mind is to catch those bigger fish, you gotta be willing to take some risks, because usually those biggest fish in the system are not around a whole bunch of others, and you're usually
can't catch 10-pounders when you're catching 18 inches, right? Or 15 inches.
And usually you're going somewhere or putting your baits in the water column somewhere where you're definitely catching less numbers, whether it be, and a lot of times it seems like more so precision control right on the bottom to trigger those. With the way the lake is now in the last couple of years, I think it's a lot of that. But bigger thing is taking some risk, going, maybe it's going further east. I told myself too, going to Green Bay. I've gone to Green Bay a ton of times, and I'm sure we got a lot of listeners there. I am never going to Green Bay again and fishing below. I'm going to draw a line from
Washington
from Oconto to Sturgeon Bay, and never going south of there. It just, how often are tournaments won down there? You could do well, and you could definitely do well. But if I go pre-fish on there, it's a waste of a day, because it's something that I could have learned.
That's catching your 5.
Yeah.
And in some aspects, that's almost admitting defeat. Some would say that, even though.
Yeah. Well, some people are real happy with a top 10 or top 20 or or whatever, and sometimes, sometimes I will take that, but you also want to fish for the win or the top 5, or at least give yourself a chance.
The 2 guys that I think would be known as Green Bay guys because they've won over $1 million, they would be Tom Keenan and Junior Arnoldson, both really good friends of mine. And it's funny because both of those guys, when they won those, I don't know, whatever they were at the time, $300,000 or whatever, they both caught end up being the winning fish in close at the end. But again, they wouldn't even been in that situation. But they came in because they went out there and they basically got four good bites or whatever that. I'm not going to quote them, but I remember having Tom on the podcast where he's like, I needed that last one, and it was in sight of the weigh-in or check-in, right? But they would have never been there if they didn't do what you said either. So.
Well, and also that was before we developed a lot of the techniques that we have in the last 5 or plus years too. So they might not have. They're done relatively as good doing that as they would nowadays.
Yeah.
I can remember like old Pete Harsh, another rest in peace guy, but he always used to say to me, like, if you ain't catching big ones, you ain't fishing deep enough.
Yeah.
And back when I was a kid, that was the opposite. Like, we had to go high, like you were letting stuff back, 10 feet behind a board.
Yeah.
And so you thought you were high when you were 25 feet back or something.
Yeah. Interesting fact, my first boat that I rode was Pete Harsh's tiller that he won. He won a PWT out of it.
I think that's the first time I ever met you or saw you, because I was like, what are you doing on Pete's boat? Like, an Erie guy with a tiller on purpose?
Yep, it was an awesome boat.
I like his quote. Yarbrough was good friends with him. He always used to tell me, Pete says, I fish for big fish. If I catch 5, I win. Like, that's fishing for big fish.
Pretty good.
And that's a guy who had a lot of wins, So.
Yeah.
So we've had like Travis Hartman, the fisheries biologist. We've had Chris Vanderdoot, both fisheries guys, and some of the research that they're showing, I think, will translate right into what I'm about to say, is that these fish are spending a lot more time deep than they used to, and especially the more mature or the bigger fish. So I mean, even with you guys, when we say deep, are you talking about putting your boat in deeper depth of water, and or the lures in the water column and that?
So for me, I'll be the first one to admit, I don't like being much deeper than maybe 45 foot of water. I like to be able to run a snap weight and hit bottom. If I can't hit bottom, I start to get a little squirrely. So like when I go out east, when I'm starting to run wire, lead core, dipsies, I can do it, but it's not my happy place. I'm flexible. Like Ryan said, we're all adaptive. We're all good at that. But I like to be able to fish 40 foot of water, 35 foot of water, and in that range is where I am targeting bottom in that for sure.
So does that mean, like, if you were to even down in Adaptability or something, you're just fishing more near shore a lot of times?
No, so like Adaptability, I've never had that luck. Usually I'm fishing the biomass fish, or is what we call them as tournament guys, where maybe I am going through 100 fish and you're hoping to catch, out of that 100 fish, you're hoping, hey, I can catch 5, 6, 7 pounders, like this past year. You're hoping you can get, a couple consistent bites versus maybe that 5 lucky bites, because I just don't know that there's a whole lot of pods out there anymore that are big fish.
Did you win the Fall Brawl one year?
I did win the Fall Brawl.
With a giant?
15 pounder.
Obviously, Obviously, you have a giant if you won the Fall Brawl, but right?
The biggest Fall Brawl winner of all time.
Biggest
right?
Lake Erie tournament fish as far as I ever know. 14.97. Pretty good one.
See, so I mean, you might have a little bit of a horseshoe.
Did you tell him why you got that?
No, you can tell.
The good mojo on why you caught that. It's all karma. So the day before, they're out there, and or I'm out there
in the tiller.
He's out there in the tiller. With,
that's why you caught it.
He's out there in the tiller with what, 4 or 5 guys?
I think it was just me and Anthony that day.
No, there was at least 3 or 4 guys.
A couple.
Fishing discrepancy.
Yeah, I don't know.
I borrowed my buddy's brand new 621 Ranger, and I'm out there, and I still don't even know how I did it. Somehow I killed the battery, and I'm stuck dead on the water out there in the bat with that. And I knew he was near. I called them. They pulled their lines, came over and jumped me. Mm-hmm. They go right out the next morning and catch the Fall Brawl winner. 15
lithium
pounders.
Jump box. Carry it and jumper cables.
Box. My boat has 2 of them.
My boat's going.
Yeah. So I call that good karma. From rescuing a brother that was out there stuck.
Luck or not, hey, it is what it is,
all
right?
Matters, yeah.
So I saw you kind of jump eyebrows a little bit there when you said like depth, and he said not more than 40 something. You're probably fishing deeper, or what's
no? I won't go. There is no depth too shallow that I will not consider. So I mean, I've definitely caught giants in 10 feet or less of water. Mm-hmm. So I am not considered that. And as for deep, I mean, that when it comes to getting out, there's no depth of water too deep, but I will let my fish hawk tell me how deep I can put my baits. I will not put my baits below like a sharp thermocline or whatnot. And I can't think of too many big walleyes I've caught deeper than 60 feet down on on Lake Erie. So usually I'm not doing much of that. I think that you kind of start to get into a dead zone there. But I mean, the thing that I'll look for when you get out in that deep water is where that thermocline meets structure, and that's my spot. Like that's where I'm going. And a lot of times, more often than not, especially as spring and summer moving on, I'm trying to put stuff targeting those really big fish right damn near the bottom.
Yeah.
So if the thermocline is in 43 feet, that's where a temperature break, for you guys that haven't seen, like you look on a fish hawk or depending on your graph on your screen, you're actually going to have a temperature break, the density change in the water for layman's terms. But let's say that's at 43 feet. So you're trying to then find rock or some type of structure in 43 feet.
Yeah, right where that hits that, because then you have two pieces of structure at the same time. I consider the thermocline a piece of structure, and then you have the actual the ground or whatever. Yeah. I've done very, very well doing that.
So this year for a tournament, me, him, we network together. We fish all, we share info for tournaments. This year for 2 tournaments, we fished a particular piece of structure that it was 70 foot of water, and then it was 45 foot of water thermocline, and we were in that piece of structure finding those 45 foot humps, and that's where the fish were stacked up. And that's kind of what he was talking about. That's a lot what we look for. We're not necessarily wanting to go fish 45 foot of water out in like Geneva, Ashtabula, but we'll look for that piece of structure, whether it be the dump, whether it be a random sand pile, whether it's a thing of rocks. That's just what we've kind of found throughout the last couple of years, where some of the bigger fish do tend to hang out.
It works very well on the sandbar too, like when you're talking in Lorraine or whatnot.
Yeah, producer dude said the other day they had a guy that made a comment about like, deep water. It was in one of the videos we did a while ago, like 45, 50 feet, that's deep water, because he was I'm assuming an Eastern Basin guy or Lake Ontario guy or whatever. Again, everything is relative, right? But as far as when you look at some of the tactics, I think that a lot of guys, and maybe when you first started doing that down there, it's very intimidating to go out and see nothing and you're in a bowl. And then again, like you said, it's harder to run certain lures and techniques when you start getting how much you have to go through. But really, the thermocline narrows that down. In most cases, I would say day in and day out, it's not below 45, 50 feet. I mean, not that it doesn't get below that, but most times. So you really kind of narrow that body of water, down where I don't think that you have as much of a tank as you think, even though there's a lot of square footage you have to go through. Is that fair or no?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's just using your tools like your fish hawk or your electronics, and where you're seeing those fish on the graph, and then just knowing from experience to put those baits in the zone, and then just being good and efficient at it, and that's what leads to a lot of our success, for sure.
Absolutely.
We had a video we shot. I'm not even sure if it's even out yet. We had Country Steve. Everybody loves to hate Country Steve, and we were just smoking him. And he's a boat Nazi too. Like me and him together, it's just there's a lot of boat control. And I'm not talking about drift socks and trolling motors.
I love the Thanksgiving Day video. That was a great one.
With the counter?
One? Yeah, the counter.
Producer dude, they love the counter. Yeah, that was. I'm not gonna say whose idea that was.
That out.
Yeah, him and Country Steve's battle on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, it was. We put a fish counter, and then Captain Chris was with us. We put a Chris's word count, because he doesn't talk at all. And it was, in fairness, he's very personable, like one-on-one, but there was a whole lot of mouths.
Stuff.
There was a lot of egos and mouths going on and whatever. But so me and Country Steve were out, and I actually had a sponsor with me, and we're going through, and we are just waylaying fish. There's nobody anywhere near us, which is always more fun for me at least. And we go back around, and the lake was absolutely as flat calm as this Ranger 621 deck. And when you come back through there, he's like, "What are you doing?" Because I sped it up. And he didn't even realize I put the fish hawk down, because again, I feel silly because I know you use it a lot too. When people are I think they think it's a gimmick. And it's like when that lake goes flat calm, like I'm pretty good at reading current and seeing changes and things. Nobody's amazing at it, but out of efficiency, I'm pretty good at it when we have waves, because that narrows down so many things to me. But when you put that fish hawk down, or I should say, when it's flat calm, the fish hawk is down, because you cannot read that stuff. And we were going this way and smoked them, and I'm like, we're coming back through. We had enough stuff out. We're not going to pick up, right?
Yeah.
Efficiency. We come back through, and I cranked. He's like, "What are you doing? We figured it out. It was it." And I don't remember what it was, but it was like, "Yeah, it's 1.4 miles an hour. That was what they're biting at." And I cranked it to 1.8. And he's like, "What are you doing?" Like, we couldn't catch anything going that way. And I'm like, "The fish hawk." And he's like, "What?"
Me and Ryan fished in MWC together, and that was where I learned about it. He was nice enough to take me and teach me some stuff, but we were fishing the Gold Coast, and you're like, oh, we're fishing like 20 foot of water. You go, how much current could there honestly be? And Ryan goes, every time we hook a board up, watch that counter, and it'd go 1.8, 1.8, 1.8. And then we were going the other way, didn't change it, and we were going 1.4. He goes, watch, we're going to turn it up to, I'm going to speed it up, let me know, 1.8. Oh, board starts going back, and you go, it was an eye-opener, because it was something I think about it when I go out east. If I go out to, like I said, Ashtabula, Geneva, I go, oh yeah, there's got to be current out here in 70 foot of water. But when you're in, Lorain, Cleveland, in 20 foot of water, you don't think about what's possibly going down under the water there.
I always ask guys, like, hey, what's one thing, when you do different interviews and things, like, hey, what's one thing you can't live without? And you're like, man, like, really? Like, how are you going to answer that? And it's funny because, like, the guys that are at Fish USA, there's some of them that are really good captains, and a couple guys that are chartered that work there part-time. And those guys all say fish hawk without even hesitating down there. And down there, they've got a little more structure than we do, and then the current seems to be even more factor. That those guys run them 100% of the time, no matter what.
I think that the biggest thing that people that don't use it regularly every day don't realize is how much it changes. Okay, so like, especially when it's calm, or especially after a blow, what's happening is that lake's just sieging back and forth. It's sloshing like a bathtub. So 1 hour, it may, especially when you're out in the middle of the lake, it may be going east to west, and the next hour it's going back the other way. And people don't realize that. It's not like, okay.
Well, and that's a great example. And here's, for somebody that maybe is trying to figure this out, if you've ever ice fished out there or watched any of our videos with that, I'm fishing on a chunk of ice. In theory, it's not moving, and I've got a 3/4 ounce, jigging wrap on or whatever it is, and it's going this way. My line is 45 in the hole. An hour later, it's going this way.
Right.
15 minutes later, it's going this way. And I think about those things in May and June when I'm out on the boat, and like, that's happening, and I'm either picking up on it or not, or I choose to think, hey, they're not biting.
Right.
Well, no, I didn't pay attention to those little factors, and it's the craziness of how strong that current is it's
and that's why I tell people too, when they're trying to, when they get it, like, people are like, oh, I'm thinking about getting a fish hawk, which one should I get? And I tell them, and then I said, well, the biggest thing is don't try to like do this mental calculation in your head, my speed over ground versus my fish hawk speed, and what's exactly the speed the current is doing in what direction. Just think, hey, what speed is triggering bites?
Yep. What did that say when we got the bites? Like when you said it said 1.8.
Don't care if it's 3 miles an hour, if it says 1.0.
And truthfully, I helped develop the X2 model, and we changed that wheel actually from what the original X4 was. And again, but it still doesn't matter. It's like it's reproducing. It's kind of like, I hate to say this out loud, but like if my line counters are off 3 feet, it doesn't matter if it's 107 or if it's 104. What matters is that I have every one of my things doing it, and I can reproduce that.
Exactly.
Now, ideally, I like to have mine all the same, so when I tell you that your reels and mine are going to be the same. But yeah, the current is the one thing I feel like I'm blue in the face. When you give seminars or talk with people, do you feel like they really don't buy in or they don't understand it? Mainly because they haven't used it?
Yeah, I feel like that with a lot of things, but yeah.
Well, in all seriousness, all of us have done seminars here at the Cleveland Boat Show before, and I still walk out of some of these things, and there's always a handful of guys that come over to the side, and they're really into it. You want to help them out. Right. But I always feel like about half of them are still asking questions that I'm like, did you listen to anything that I said? Not that my word is the end all be all, but when you get that guy that's still asking, hey, what color crankbait, or and you're like, they're like, well, I would never buy a fish hawk because it's $700 or whatever that they are right now, Fish USA. But that guy has no problem buying $20 custom painted crankbaits. Right? And he's got piles of them. And then we all see them, since you're the Facebook guy. They're selling them in the off season. Hardly used. I got 30 dozen.
Right? I think a lot of those people are like what you talked about earlier, where they're the guys with the dipsy straight up, like you said. Like if you spend enough time in a bait shop, they're the same guys that go, hey, from as soon as that water hits 50 degrees, I'm gonna start running worms. As soon as the water hits 70, I'm gonna run spoons, and then as soon as it comes back, I'm gonna do the opposite. And or they think, hey, they come into Erie Outfitters, one I mainly hang out at, and they go, hey, I'm gonna run. I caught nothing but purple, caught him on nothing but purple husky jerks today. If you're not running purple husky jerks, you're not going to catch a fish. And then the guy behind him will go, hey, I was casting gold beads. If you weren't throwing gold beads, you're not going to catch a fish. And then it's the same thing. It's like some people get stuck in their ways, and you go, hey, did you try anything else but purple husky jerks? And they go, well, I had 6 of them out. And you go, okay, well then, there is some other stuff that probably works. They get set in their ways and they go, this is my way to do it.
The thing to take out of that, what I've learned is, because I've got a couple guys that work for me running trips, and they're very good fishermen, but we're generally in eyesight of each other in most cases. And at the end of the day, when we're doing well, we don't communicate a lot. When one guy is or isn't, then we communicate quite a bit. But so many days we kind of all just do our own thing, and I'll talk to you at the end of the day and I'll be like, huh? And I think so much of what you just said comes down to the word is not color, but it's confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Yeah, confidence.
And having that lure in the water, whatever it is, when you go through that active pod, and you're like, oh, that's it. And it's like, you could have put a shoe on down there. We've all been on those bites where when you have 6 rods go back at the same time, which we're fortunate to have that on Lake Erie at times, or maybe it's 8 if you got 8 rods out, whatever it is. I don't think the color, unless I doubt you had 8 of the same thing on. I hope you don't, because that would be a serious sellout deal right there, right? But I guess one of the other things that maybe help guys that are listening to this, and especially the guys that are maybe a Wisconsin guy, they're coming to Lake Erie for a week, maybe once a year, or maybe they're a guy that just wants to come here as a bucket list trip from the Dakotas, or we kind of get where I'm going with this. But the one thing me and you were talking about before the show here was, what is a guy that doesn't fish here all the time? Or maybe it's somebody like Tyler when he was starting out. Like, what do you learn to do? And I think it's fighting fish or how to land a big fish.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Like, if you don't do it, right? I mean, that's why I think so many of the record walleyes, when you look all over the country, they're caught by people that weren't even walleye fishing.
That's true.
Like, now that should tell us a lot about probably location and all this other stuff. But I think it's, gear and stuff. Like, most of us, I watch guys, they went as a guide, or even when we run shows and doing promotion stuff, when you watch guys fighting fish or with their gear set up, not that walleye's gonna like break everything up or tear it up like a salmon would.
Right.
But do you think that their setup or their mannerisms or their handling of things is right?
Well, there's a lot to it. I mean, it's just like tournament fishing. When you come in from a tournament, the guy who got 3rd, 4th, and 5th place, what's the first thing they say? Oh, I lost a big one that would have made the difference. And it's not easy, but there's a ton of things that you can do to better control that fish. First of all, not getting tangled. And that's just becoming efficient at running planer boards or dipsies or whatever you're doing. That, and then boat control is critical. So that just comes with experience and being out there and learning that. You don't want to, speed up too much for your fish, and you don't want to slow down, and you want to, I'd always try to keep that angle the same. I don't want that fish right on the surface, and I don't want it right underneath the boat, coming straight up vertical. So if I'm the guy controlling the boat, I'm constantly adjusting the speed of the boat as that fish is coming in, right at that 45-degree angle. And then the other thing, nothing will drive me.
Oh, I like it. He's getting fiery here.
Nothing drives me more crazy than when the guy on the rod cranks the fish right into the motor, or right into the back, right into the transom of the boat.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah.
Give me some music.
So you got to understand, when you have that rod, I mean, in like a boat like this, you have that rod, you have a whole deck, a huge deck, and all these boxes you could stand up and walk around, and you can move around and adjust the angle of that rod to steer that fish to surface right where you want it.
Yep.
And when do they usually shake hooks?
First time they come out of the water.
When they come right to the surface, okay? But when's the best time to net them? Right when they first surface.
Well,
so
as a guide, I mean, or again, it's any different when you take your neighbor out, it's the same scenario. To me, there's 2 things. There's the operator error.
Yep.
But a lot of it, I think, comes down to the captain or the guy running the boat, because it's our job.
Yep.
It's our job to communicate. Now, there's some people that just don't listen. Let's just be honest, whether it's your neighbor, guide client, or whatever. But the other thing I see is these guys we're in a Ranger boat. We got all the latest and greatest. These things I don't care what you buy. They're not cheap anymore. I see these guys with really nice gear, and they got this junk-ass net with a handle this long.
Oh, yeah.
I've got a 9-foot handle on my net, and I'm gonna actually have one that's coming out. It's a whole new net deal coming out, which I can't tell you yet, but I've got a 10-foot on this one. Oh, and it's there's no flex in it. It's naughty. Yeah, it's sweet. And I'll tell you about it later.
10 foot, that's a lot to handle.
It is, but there's how many times have you had that where most of the time you can still choke up, you don't have to use it.
Yep.
But yet when that thing comes off on the
nice to
surface,
have.
especially if you're in deep water or going out, like even the 9 foot that I have now, it's going to be the 9 foot Beckman that I'm using. I have a lot of people that try to grab that and they're like, oh, it's like, yeah, if you're not used to that, that's a whole lot of net.
So one big thing I would say, if you're coming to Ohio, come to Lake Erie, bring a good net guy. That is a big tip. Have somebody that you're confident with. My friends always laugh at me. They're like, you don't like reeling in fish. No, I love reeling in fish, but I also really like netting fish. Like that's my biggest pet peeve. I know when I did National Walleye Tour, I netted all the fish, both days. I think Ryan is opposite. I think you like to be the reel guy.
I like the reel because I want to steer that fish absolutely to the perfect spot to net it. And both jobs are very important.
Yep.
But if you're on the rod and you make that fish surface 4 feet off the either corner of the boat, and it doesn't surface till then, and as soon as that fish first breaches water, bang, now.
Yep.
Nothing. And then the other thing, so I said, nothing drives me more crazy than when someone reels one into the motor, or when the net man reaches for the fish when it's still 2 feet under the water.
Yep.
So much
double clutches.
So much can go wrong.
Producer, I do that, but I'm a very good net man. You don't want to, but I'm a very aggressive netter.
Me too.
Because I've watched enough.
It is aggressive, and when it's either, if you want to go when it's like 6 inches underwater, maybe I could buy that. But I'd pretty much tell you guys, okay, you could feel the fish give up, like at that last second, boom, its head hits the surface, pow.
Yep.
And
my netting is do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah. We back to that. So fishing that tournament with Ryan, when we did that, he was a when you go, you go. There's no don't think about it. You get that fish in the net. Don't think about, hey, should I go? When that fish comes up, you get it. And I'd like to say the same thing. I'd like to say I'm a really good net guy. There's very few times I can think of that I've lost a fish. I can't think of one I've lost one in a tournament netting, which there's no wood in the Rangers, so I can't knock on wood, unfortunately. But
I'm thinking about carrying a piece of wood just to be able to knock on.
Find something here, but
screw a piece of wood on the dash.
No kidding. But that's but like I said, over time, I just have the confidence now that I think I can coach somebody like Ryan. You take your daughters out. You catch a lot of fish with your daughters. I've seen them catch the big ones. I love taking my wife out. She likes to fish, but she's not a person.
Better than you.
She's probably better than me, but. She's here somewhere. She's here somewhere. She's up over there. She'll yell at me. Yeah, she's pretty awesome. But I feel like if I can coach her, and she does get yelled at a couple times. Fall Brawl time, she gets a talking to. She will. Woo. She likes putting them in right between the motors, and I'm like, and that's also my fault. You can steer a little. We got these amazing Altrexes and everything else that we all run that we could help them out a little bit with. But
so the other thing I would recommend too, it's a simple tool. I don't know who sells it. I saw one over there at D&B Marine, but it's the magnet. It attaches to it attaches to the hoop of the net, and then to the shaft of the net, so that your hoop's not dangling in the water, and then the weight of the fish releases the magnet.
Same thing. I run a downrigger clip.
I forget what it's called, but
it's like a downrigger clip. It just clips out of the net, and when it just the magnet pops loose.
But very very handy.
Mm-hmm. So again, if you even listen to my seminar tonight, like a lot of the stuff we talked about is kind of what I focus on. It's getting away from like what color crankbait or what color spinner blade, but yet people always want to hear that. So we've got to give a little benefit to the people that made it through this long in the podcast. So I want Tyler start with want each of you guys to give me, kind of that go-to thing or something, as far as presentations, that little it factor that's kind of like, even though we talked about not, living memories and fishing memories and doing all that, but yet there's got to be that one thing you kind of go to.
Yep.
And
I'll give you two. I got so my favorite bait, Ryan knows it. A lot of people know it. I got two, I guess. It's called Golden Boy. It's a goby imitator. Could be goby imitator, baby walleye. It's many things.
It's kind of like silver, black, and white. Is that it?
It looks like a little walleye.
It looks like a little walleye almost.
Kind of with a heavy dose of white.
Yeah, with a lot of white on the bottom. So I love that. Yep, love that. I love pulling it on the bottom. Love running it weightless. Love it everywhere. I also love the opposite version of that, which is called Neon Golden Boy, which is pink and yellow.
Sounds like something Ryan would have done in college.
Yeah. And I actually think that's the first time like me and you did it was that tournament, and we had a lot of luck on that particular bait. So like those are my two biggest confidence baits. But the fish we actually won the Fall Brawl on was a bait my buddy had pulled out of his special mate. We go, let's just grab the ugliest bait in the box, and he did. He blew off this bait, never touched water before. It was gold with a purple belly. Never seen anything like it before. It literally went in the water, fished for probably 2 minutes, caught that fish, hung it on the shelf, and it's never been back in the water again. And I've never bought another version of that one, never used it again.
Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Yeah, you gotta go find some purple bellies. Maybe
you know what I did with Dottie?
Ryan's got a legendary bait that he owns, but it was just the inverse to say I have one that I have super confidence in, but there's also, like you said, you can't get in the box. So we picked the ugliest bait out of his box. He threw it out there, and it catches you a 15-pounder. So it's just when it's sometimes when it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
I think we can all kind of relate to that.
Yeah.
So what's yours, Ryan?
There's not too many days that I go out there that a blue chrome and a fire tiger doesn't go in the water of whatever that be a flicker minnow or bandit or perfect 10 or even if I'm throwing a blade bait. So those are kind of money colors, but I'll kind of go a little different angle and tell since you're talking about. It doesn't even have
to be a color. It could be like a way of a presentation or where you're putting it. Like that think about it like this. You've got an hour to catch the best fish you can, or you're going to get shot.
I'm snap waiting on top of rocks.
And I'm Lake Erie Walleye fishing?
Yep.
I mean, like, what time of year?
Well, that's true. Yeah, that does add up.
You can give me multiples. We'll allow multiples.
All right, well, I'll tell you. So, all right, fine. This is an easy one. So I fished the National Walleye Tour on Lake Erie, I don't know how long, maybe 5 years ago. I got second place in that one. It was a really tough bite that week. Like, people were singing the blues. I mean, we were doing so-so. But I had one bait. I was running, it was, I think it was called Spaced Out is what it was. Spaced Out Bandit is what it was called. But it was this one bait, and I had multiples of this bait and this color, and I'm running them, and I might run 2 of them or 3 of them. Well, this one bait
was catching them all.
So, and it's got some neon dots. It's like purple and black with some neon dots, and so I named it Dottie. I named that bait Dottie.
Remember when we lost it? And that was like the worst?
We did not lose it.
Well, we broke it off.
No, we did not break it off. We hung it and we had to spin around and So, anyways, I named that bait Dottie.
You were snapping it on the bottom?
It was a big tournament. So
it was a big deal.
Must have been. Whoa, that's a paper bait.
Dottie caught. So I weighed 8 fish in that tournament. Dottie caught probably 5 of the 8 fish in that tournament. And it was a 4-rod tournament. And so after I only used Dottie for special scenarios. And one time, we were fishing. It was in the COVID year. We were fishing the fish donkey tournament, and I had. This is a sore subject for him. I had my 2 brothers out, and in the fish donkey tournaments, you could see the live standings. It's like you measure your fish and you upload them to an app, so you could see, Tyler's ahead by so many inches or whatever. It was just fun. There's like 15 of us doing it, and it was like maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and he's got like
145 inches.
He's got a pretty decent lead, but we're like a close second. And I text him, I'm like, that's it. I'm like, Dottie's coming out, you're done. And so I took Dottie out, which I only take her out in special scenarios.
Did Dottie matter?
Oh, ask him.
Dottie came back.
Yeah.
Dottie came back.
It was over.
I'd like to say I had more weight.
It was over before
it was a length-based tournament. I'd like to say I had more weight than him just to have one up on him, but
I never thought we would, end the Bigwater podcast talking about Dottie, but it may happen. Like, that could be the thing. What's your other one? You say, did you have another one?
No, I mean, like if you just I have 1 hour to catch the one biggest fish in my life depending on it. Dottie's going in the water. But that's a hard question for me, just because I don't think like that.
We all have a Dottie.
If I'm going out on Lake Erie, I'm putting a snap weighting, or even maybe if I'm shallow enough, I'm banging a crankbait on the bottom somewhere. Preferably on rocks somewhere.
So for me, I guess it's not your life dependent on it deal. But last year, National Walleye Tour, my co was in second place, and I'm like, hey, we're running out to the weather buoy, basically the outer dump, and I'm like, we're gonna get maybe a pass or two in before we're done. So same thing, you got an hour or two, and so of my 4 colors, I think I had two golden boys and 2 neon golden boys, and I'm like, we're gonna get it or we're not. And was it life changing? Maybe not, but I caught the second biggest bag of the tournament by an ounce, and so for me, I took second place national walleye tour. It's not life dependent on it, but it was somewhat life changing for me. It allowed me to buy a new boat. It allowed me to put a down payment on my house. So it was just one of those deals where yes, it wasn't like I said, it wasn't your life depends on it, but it kind of did in a way. If that it changed my lifestyle in a way, if that makes sense.
Mama got some new shoes.
That's right.
Mama got an engagement ring.
Mama did get an engagement.
Yeah, that's what you should have said.
Yeah, we're gonna edit this.
Yeah.
Mrs. Berthold, so that this boy he's young and slow, Ryan. He doesn't know he's got to be.
She's over there eyeballing us. She's over there hiding behind the clothes rack.
Nice. Well, I can't think of a better way to end it. Thanks, guys, for your insight on really all things, but it's obviously Lake Erie's and walleyes in general. But thanks for tuning into the Bigwater podcast. Who knew that Dottie was going to be the showstopper, but yet it was. I hope you guys all find your own Dottie. Not quite literally, because we want to take it if you do, of course. But bigwaterfishing.com. You can find us producer. Are we everywhere? Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, Google. I don't even know. Just look it up. Bigwater Fishing. All the digital download sites. He's shaking his head. He doesn't have a microphone. Tyler does it. That's all we got for the Cleveland Boat Show. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks.